Intel blasted on stage at its Vision 2024 event with some news.
Papa's little baby here. Man, look at this big boy. Yeah. And, you know, I sort of looked at the prior decade. That's sort of boring. You know, we made PCI Gen a little bit faster. We made DDR the next increment. You know, we kicked up the thermal envelope a little bit. You know, we added a few more cores and we said, okay, it's a good chip. Boring.
Definitely a different approach from NVIDIA. Let's see if they're excited about anything.
Gaudi 3. You know, huge advancements.
Okay, still a different approach, but that's better.
Whoosh. I am the sound effect.
But what we really care about is the marketing music behind it. You might remember NVIDIA's brainwashing music previously.
I really
This is the part.
like NVIDIA.
And we're concerned about if Intel has an answer to that.
In the township of Quo, where many folks lacked vision, Chief Geek Pat and sales guy Shell were shopkeepers on a mission. They thought what Quo needed was a spark of inspiration, so they whipped up a batch of woohoo chips they knew would cause a sensation. Our business exploded with lines out the door.
What the fuck? Intel just got done with its Vision 2024 keynote event, and you can guess what they were talking about.
AI.
AI.
But Intel is absolutely taking this seriously, and actually so is Google. Both companies announced their plans for AI accelerators, and both of them appear to be aiming at NVIDIA to try and knock them down a few pegs, if not maybe later eventually try and take the crown. NVIDIA has been asserting absolute and total dominance over the AI market for some time now and has been expanding more into the software side of things, which is probably cause for concern for its competitors because they start to create this ecosystem where if you want AI anything, you're attached somehow to NVIDIA. And Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger took some direct shots in the Vision 2024 keynote.
Industry is quickly moving away from proprietary CUDA models, and Gaudi is the only benchmark alternative to the NVIDIA H100 for training LLMs. And
It's actually not the first time that Gelsinger made comments about CUDA having maybe a limited lifespan. Back in around 2008 or so, before he was CEO at Intel, he had a comment about CUDA being an interesting footnote in the annals of history. And looking forward to seeing how Google auto-transcribes that word. We'll find out. I'm not going to change it. So whatever it comes up with, we'll leave it there. Maybe it'll be like when NVIDIA's auto-transcript from the keynote said,
To connect ANSYS to the Omniverse digital twin.
Fun fact, they changed it after our video. I was sad. Before that, this video is brought to you by Lian Li and the O11D Evo RGB case. The O11D Evo RGB is an updated entry to the famed O11 lineup, retaining heavy support for fan mounts, drive mount locations, and flexibility on component mounting, such as two options for the power supply. The O11D Evo RGB's dual chamber approach aims to maximize cable storage on the backside to streamline cable management, coupling this with a unique vertical GPU mount to showcase the most expensive part in most systems. Learn more at the link in the description below. Regardless of whether you're using any of this hardware today or you're even in that part of the industry, you will probably be using it in some form at some point. That's either going to be directly as all of this stuff comes down to consumer, it does tend to go that way, just less powerful. We see NPUs in the CPUs today, which are AI accelerators built into hardware that are meant for accelerating these so-called AI tasks. And even if you're not going to use that stuff, probably consumption via services online is the next likely route. So we haven't seen Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA be this amped up and aggressively competitive in quite some time. It's clear that they see a huge money opportunity here. And they're all going for a land grab in what they see as a new world. Actually, there's some new markets here too, not just software and selling those solutions to companies, but also there's some talk of manufacturing targeting, things that would be traditionally seen as not a consumer of this ultra high-end type of accelerator, CPU, GPU, whatever it may be. So anyway, Intel's event this year debuted its Gaudi 3 accelerator and also some new CPUs. So those are the primary two announcements. They also talked about software. They talked about Ethernet as an alternative to NVLink and pushing some development in the Ethernet space. And Intel directly targeted NVIDIA's H100 as a head-to-head comparison for performance on the hardware side. So that's kind of big news because the H100 has been backordered into oblivion. There's a big opportunity there for any other hardware vendor to strike for companies that either can't wait in line because they need it now, or companies that aren't big enough to get a spot high up enough in the line. So it will now have Blackwell to compete with as well with its Gaudi 3 parts. And Intel seems to be aware, we'll talk about this later in this video, that they are not going to be the #1 immediately, but they are still trying to line up as competition. Google and AMD are ramping up their efforts this year as well in the same space, and we expect to see more from AMD at Computex this year. Now for Gaudi 3, it was joined by Xeon 6 announcements. The Xeon 6, it lacks a prime number. You might have noticed that from the 6. And that to us is concerning because Intel has 3s and 5s and 7s. If Intel has depleted its prime number supply, it's over. I guess there's the 9. But the Vision 2024 keynote with CEO Pat Gelsinger wasn't as information dense as NVIDIA's GTC keynote, but there was still a lot of good detail for us to cover, along with our impressions on Intel's general positioning and strategy in the exploding AI compute market. And because gaming and crypto have gotten too boring for them to talk about,
Boring.
AI is the newest craze. We'll see to what extent it sticks around in this capacity, but that's what everyone's talking about now. And at least some of these things can be deployed for non-deep learning or machine learning use cases as well. But everybody is gunning for NVIDIA right now. Currently, they have a combination of leading hardware and software solutions, but also a massive head start on some in-house designed solutions like I/O. NVLink, for example, was huge for NVIDIA in this year's Blackwell keynote. And the company also went multi-chip with its approach to silicon. Intel is countering with a push for more open solutions, including relying on Ethernet instead of NVLink, and it's taken an angle that's actually somewhat familiar to AMD's approach to marketing GPUs and developing them, which is that both companies are promoting a level of openness and focusing marketing on non-proprietary solutions. And that is clearly aimed at NVIDIA, or at least we think so anyway. It seems like it may be a sort of enemy of my enemy type of situation for these companies. And one of the biggest advancements for NVIDIA, again, based on our exposure to this side of the market, has been the multiple silicon approach to Blackwell and also the NVLink solution. We talked about that in our NVIDIA coverage, giving some opinions and some of the details about the news from that event. But Jensen's modern definition of a GPU has changed.
Somebody used to say, you guys make GPUs, and we do, but this is what a GPU looks like to me. When somebody says GPU, I see this.
And that's going to be a consideration for all of its competitors, because regardless of what you call it, it is actually not just the literal GPU silicon anymore that matters. Jensen Huang was absolutely right in that sense, because these devices need to talk to each other at speeds that don't hamstring them significantly. And so that's where these I/O solutions and interconnects and things like that come in. And that's something that Intel talked about in its Vision keynote.
One of the critical things that customers are saying is, boy, how do I stitch these together? Well, there's some proprietary solutions available. We also see that the Ultra Ethernet Consortium and the work that we're driving is standing up to fill this scale-up and scale-out networking domain. And through UEC, Intel is revolutionizing, building on Ethernet networking for AI fabrics for the future. And we'll be introducing an array of AI-optimized Ethernet solutions. This lineup will include cutting-edge AI NIC cards that we'll be delivering, standard NIC solutions. It will also include AI chiplets that will enable for our customers and partners in Intel Foundry.
We're not experts in this space of AI. We talk about gaming hardware. This stuff's cool to us. It's fun to cover because it's interesting. Technologically, it's fun to study and read about, and some of it does come to consumer. But as far as we understand this market, again, coming from our perspective of non-experts in this so-called AI era, as far as we understand it, it seems to me that the approach to Ethernet or some open standard here would be critical for all these non-NVIDIA companies to, in some form, collaborate on, because it may need to be a strength in numbers effort against the behemoth that is NVIDIA now, and that if they all go off and develop their own standards and proprietary solutions, then they'll lack that focused effort in numbers. But ultimately, what we took away from Intel's keynote was that if you are a company with big compute or AI needs, you go to Intel for the same reason that you go to Waffle House at 3 a.m. They're open and they're cheap. It's not an insult, by the way. If I weren't a fan of 3 a.m. Waffle House, why would I inexplicably have this sign that I probably shouldn't have? The answer is there's a security company founded by ex-Waffle House staff. That's how I knew they were good at security. Moving on, CEO Pat Gelsinger opined how beneficial open platforms like PyTorch are, and repeatedly stated the value proposition and lower total cost of ownership, or TCO, of its solution versus the proprietary and expensive competition. The competition, again, of course, being NVIDIA. Everyone already knows which company is number one right now in the compute market. It's not even a question. You pull up NVIDIA's stock numbers and it becomes pretty clear. What is uncertain, though, is which company is going to be number two in the longer term, because everybody is trying to get into this, even companies that aren't traditional silicon manufacturers like AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA. We don't think Intel or AMD would admit what's going on here is a fight for second place, but that's kind of what's happening right now. You have to get there before fighting for first. But that doesn't mean Intel isn't trying to win the top spot. According to Gelsinger and Intel, the new Gaudi 3 Accelerator chip can do LLM-related generative AI tasks at what they say, in at least some scenarios, is 40 to 50% faster than NVIDIA's H100. We don't have a way to validate that. That's not the kind of testing we do, but that's the claim. And Intel is also trying to reach manufacturing clients, which this we thought was pretty interesting, because this is a trend we've seen in NVIDIA as well, where NVIDIA kind of kicked this off, but targeting places like factories, warehouses, facilities that traditionally you might not associate with these super intensive computational needs, maybe Amazon kind of aside for their logistical efforts and companies like that. But they are both targeting this sector, which opens up probably some new client base that they might not have had before. And we think that's due to a recognition that in this instance, you could start using things like AI, deep learning, machine learning, whatever, to either fuel things like robotics, so like Amazon does with using robots in the workforce, and some level of AI and automation mixed together to pick and place or pack the right products. And it can definitely also be used for more advanced logistics like routing for all of the various delivery vehicles and the various modes of transport involved in between point A and B. This is a quote. Intel was direct in its outreach to that sector. Here's what they said.
Normally, right, remember manufacturing, supply chains, those kind of things, the developers get the cool PCs, and then the mediocre ones, go to the white-collar workers, and then the crap ones, okay, we'll give those to the manufacturing. No! Call your head of IT. It is time for a PC AI refresh, because use cases like this show extraordinary value for fleet upgrades now.
There's more to all of this than just hardware, of course. So they also talked about software, but we'll start with the Gaudi 3 Accelerator. This was Intel's biggest announcement for the event, as far as we're concerned anyway. And technically, Supermicro accidentally leaked it early on stage.
We're also showing a real Gaudi 3 system, the world's first Gaudi 3 system in our.
Well, I haven't even announced it yet.
We're a little bit ahead.
Okay.
I encourage everybody to go to our booth, just check it out.
Genuinely a really good save, though. The package has 16 total silicon tiles, or chiplets. The two largest in the middle contain 64 tensor cores, 8 matrix math engines, a media engine, and 96 megabytes of SRAM cache. There's also I/O, which is made up of 24 200 gigabit Ethernet connections along the left, and 16 PCIe Gen 5 lanes on the right. The top and bottom have links for the HBM2E memory, which are the 8 medium-sized tiles that you see along the edges there. The total memory capacity for Gaudi 3 is 128 gigabytes with 3.7 terabytes per second of bandwidth, and it'll be available as a PCIe add-in card with a 600-watt TDP. So that's, again, the big difference from NVIDIA not using NVLink, of course. For performance, a single Gaudi 3 is listed at 1835 teraflops of FP8 performance, scaling up to universal baseboard, which, as we understand it, is what would go inside a compute server, with 8 accelerators, brings that up to 14.6 petaflops of FP8. It also have over 1 terabyte of HBM2E with 29.6 terabytes per second of bandwidth and 9.6 terabytes per second of bidirectional networking. Just a quick note here as well, it appears that Gaussianer might have misspoken on stage. He said that the memory is HBM3E. All of the slides and the white paper, though, indicate HBM2E. And NVIDIA made a similar transpositional mistake with HBM in its presentation, so maybe it's just an HBM thing. And Intel is excited about it.
Man, look at this big boy. Yeah. I always bring Big Brother along with me.
Nothing says giant mega corporation hosts AI keynote quite like the phrase Big Brother. Most of the performance metrics that Intel provided were listed as comparisons to NVIDIA's H100 or just sort of standalone. Intel claims Gaudi 3 is 40% faster in time to train and 50% more power efficient than NVIDIA's H100 in large language models. That's in a specific workload, though, as this chart clearly shows that it's actually a give and take between Gaudi 3 and the H100, marked as the NVIDIA 100 here to make sure at least one person gets confused and thinks that means Blackwell. One more thing on Gaudi, after its stage announcement, Intel also posted its Gaudi 3 AI Accelerator white paper with significantly more detail. A lot of this goes beyond the scope of what we typically cover, but there's a couple interesting diagrams worth showing. This block diagram shows the multi-die approach that Intel is taking. In this diagram, you can see 2 dies separated horizontally across the center and flanking HBM2E modules on the sides. The orientation is different from the one shown in some of the slides previously. The whole white paper gives a relatively deep detailing of the capabilities, including a ton of first-party numbers against the H100 and also additional diagrams showing PCB layout. That one's kind of cool. They also show workflow, canonical pipelines, and detail the capabilities of the hardware. We thought this diagram of their scale-out cluster architectures was cool as well, acting like a sort of map between clusters here. But we'll leave the white paper here since some of the details in the document go beyond our scope and knowledge. We did want to bring it to everyone's attention, though, just in case you're interested in this type of technology briefing. It's out there available publicly. Intel also announced its Xeon 6 CPUs, so we'll get into those now. The first one will be Sierra Forest, or
Papa's little baby.
Why do all the executives do this?
Papa's here.
It's Intel's first volume part made with the Intel 3 process node that we're aware of, and it'll be available this quarter. It's entirely composed of E-cores, leading to a quoted 2.4x improvement in performance per watt versus the previous generation. Intel did a comparison of 200 racks of servers going down to 72 with Xeon 6 based on the performance per watt metrics. There's also a P-core design or performance core design that'll follow up later. That is called Granite Rapids, and I had to double check my notes to not get swapped on the names because AMD has CPUs in the 9000 desktop series coming out. Probably, it's not like 100% confirmed that's the name of them, but its new CPUs coming out later this year will be called Granite Ridge. Intel is Granite Rapids. The way to think about it is Intel has lots of lakes and water featured code names. So Rapids, water, they've got a nice theme going on. Intel didn't share performance or efficiency numbers for those, likely because they're probably more similar to the outgoing generation. There was also a small segment on Intel's upcoming mobile client CPUs, codenamed Lunar Lake. These are central to what Intel is calling the AI PC. It's a magical new revolution in personal computing, and it's something that every business should buy immediately. Intel made that very clear. So if you don't buy these, you're behind. Just think of all the other people buying AI PCs for their employees at their businesses. You can do so much AI with the AI and the AI PC. It's just, there's so much AI in those PCs. We have to get it out. We have to rescue it.
Papa's little baby.
Seriously, Gaussianer was doing everything except begging all the CEOs in the audience to buy new laptops. And Michael Dell, the founder of Dell, even got one for free from this guy.
It's been a lot of fun, working super closely together.
Lunar Lake is quoted as having 3 times the AI performance as the current Core Ultra lineup with 45 NPU tops of performance. 3x is a huge leap, but it's not really surprising to us since this is a follow-up to a first-generation product and things are accelerating rapidly right now. Intel listed Microsoft Copilot, the Adobe Suite, Zoom, and Teams as the applications with new AI functions. And finally, new CPUs with 3rd-generation NPUs, codenamed Panther Lake, are in production now, according to Intel. Now for the software stack. So Intel also talked a little bit about this. It was light on the details. It's an area where NVIDIA is making big moves right now. They spent a lot of their presentation talking about it. Intel's jumping in on the software side. And the main takeaway is that Intel is also providing these curated pipelines in a similar way to NVIDIA's NIMs, which is their inference microservices that we covered last month. And Intel additionally talked about RAG.
You're telling me they have garbage data?
Yeah, okay. Yes.
It's clear that the business world is legitimately excited about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, where you have a pre-trained LLM's response take a separate data set or document into consideration. In practice, this means an LLM shouldn't need to be trained with proprietary or sensitive data in order to reference or know it. And critically, it can cite a source for the data. Intel showed this off by having an employee working in one of its silicon fabs use an LLM running locally on the laptop to identify and parse information about a contamination incident. This was clearly staged, but LLMs with RAG really do seem to have potential for being useful in a business setting. So some closing thoughts here. Again, we like to cover this stuff because it's interesting, it's different. It is cool to learn about technology in general, and a lot of this is hardware, even with the software side stuff. But because we're not an AI-focused outlet, sometimes it gives us maybe a unique or a different perspective on these types of events, where we're looking at it more strictly from a, what does this mean for a consumer ultimately? At the end of the day, whether that's way down the line as a user of a service that uses these products and software solutions, or if it's literal use of a solution that eventually gets sold to you, like something such as an NPU in a laptop. So that's kind of our approach to this type of coverage, and that's how we like to think about it. Now, Intel knows it's going to need time to catch up to NVIDIA, and it wasn't hiding that fact. In a statement, actually, it sounded like Gelsinger was almost asking investors to just hold on a little bit longer. We're getting there.
You know, everything I've talked about today, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's also not going to take long.
And that statement is probably the most indicative from this keynote of the company's general mindset right now, which is that it's not positioning itself as having bested NVIDIA. It's not saying we've defeated them, that's it, we're number one now. What it is instead saying is that it's working on it. And that acknowledgement is kind of interesting because that's not typical. It's become more common, which is probably a good thing. But Intel in years past, say about a decade ago, well, actually, let's go back to the snake oil thing. It's like months ago. But a decade ago in particular, I remember being at events where they clearly did not have anything noteworthy. It was a refresh of a refresh of a refresh. This is like can't make 10 nanometer work era of Intel. So we're talking 14 nanometer quadruple plus. And I remember being at some of those events and Intel talking big game about how much of a market leader it is, how revolutionary these products are. And it does seem like there's a little bit more humility in this announcement. Now, they were still bragging about a lot, but it's a different tone than the Intel that we encountered in the consumer space until AMD kind of kicked it in the ass a little bit and maybe taught it to not sit too long on old technology. So we'll see where it's going. It does seem like all of these companies are behaving a little bit differently lately with this new AI craze. There is a certain level of competitive aggression, not necessarily in a negative sense, but in they're trying to take each other's market share in a new space sense. And that indicates to us that they see this as obviously a massive market. NVIDIA has proven that. Companies like Google and Amazon are jumping in. They don't want to get left behind. And there's attempts at acquisitions like we saw previously with NVIDIA attempting to acquire ARM that indicate a potential future of a consolidation like we see in most industries where if you can't beat your competitors or if you're concerned about them, just buy them, make them go away or become part of your outfit. So it's a really interesting territory right now that will affect consumers whether, again, that's in our actual DIY PC space or just in daily life as users of all this stuff indirectly. But anyway, Intel's announcements do appear to point toward an attempt at fighting for second place. And that is what we think most of these companies are going to be doing right now, whether or not they say that. They want to establish themselves as the other one, with NVIDIA being the primary, and then eventually probably fight for that primary spot. So that's it for this one. Really interesting space right now. As always, thanks for watching. We'll have our consumer hardware news coming up. And then we also have a bunch of reviews coming up. So just finished working on some cases. We've got ITX and ATX in the pipe for some new reviews. Some coolers are getting written and filmed in the next couple days. Really exciting with all the things we have lined up now. So check back for all that. As always, subscribe for more. Check out our interviews recently too. We did a number of them with different companies. And that's all for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.